Norm here for West Hempstead Echo. We're visiting with Ed Ra, New York State Assembly member, and talking about what he's going to do for West Hempstead. Ed, thanks so much for taking the time to sit with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've been representing West Hempstead for quite some time.
Yes, so I'm in my 13th year in the Assembly.
Wow.
So the first year of my 7th term. When I was first elected in 2010, the 21st district really covered all of West Hempstead, and then the next redistricting, it kind of got cut somewhat in half, and it was more just the northern portion. And now with the last redistricting, I'm happy to say that I really have the lion's share of West Hempstead under the district I represent, which is the 19th. I'm in my capacity in the legislature. I've had the opportunity for the last 4 years now to be the ranking member on the Ways and Means Committee that handles all of our budgetary matters. So that has been a focus in dealing with our budget, and it was an interesting year in that regard, certainly, and will be in the next year, because we just got our financial plan for the enacted budget just a couple weeks ago, and the numbers aren't looking too pretty. So,
yeah, well, we've been through our own budget issues. West Hempstead, as you know, has gone through a pretty turbulent period of education, public education budgetary, and what's been going on in our town has been, well, to put it mildly, ugly. And it's all about the fact that we have a declining population of public school kids and an increasing budget, constantly increasing. So much so that we had to take millions of dollars out of reserve in order to cover some of the issues that have to get covered for the kids to get a good education. And I think everyone wants to see a good education, but obviously when taxes continue to grow, it becomes a serious problem, especially when a good portion of the population is sending kids to parochial school. They have a double budget now. So I guess the bottom line is there anything in the horizon from the state to help with the public school budgets?
well, I think that we, if people are aware, there was this formula called foundation aid that came about years ago as a result of a court decision. Over the years, there's been talk of when does finally get fully phased in. It has now, in this year's budget, finally been fully phased in, which I think everybody's now viewing as an opportunity to really now go back and figure out what comes next in terms of updating some of the formulas, because one of the things with foundation aid was it is relying on really data from back when it first started, and I think in many districts, but I think certainly in West Hempstead, the data that it's reflecting in time period is not accurate to what West Hempstead and that district currently looks like, and what their budgets look like, and all of that stuff. So I think that that hopefully presents an opportunity with some modernization of that formula to better benefit a district like West
Yeah, but I
Hempstead.
think in general, we are also operating as a community on projections that were made a decade ago. And so, although they did project that there would be a declining population, that continues to be a problem in that we're dealing with old data. And we need to, I need to find some kind of asset from the state that'll come forward and maybe do an independent study for West Hempstead, help us get an alignment of our costs and to see whether we're operating in the most efficient way we possibly can.
Sure, and I think there are some, as you mentioned earlier, some unique things about the district in terms of, the large portion that go to different types of parochial schools and religious and other private schools. I know that, it's, my understanding is, the number of different schools that kids are bused out of West Hempstead is, it's a very large number from my understanding, and that the transportation costs are a big chunk of the budget. But yeah, I think we have to take a holistic view of overall what's going on and what the current student population looks like, both who's attending public, who's attending the private schools, and find a good path forward.
I think that we've been seeing a lot of talk about rezoning from the Albany. Albany tried to push through, the governor tried to push through a rezoning bill that would have allowed for more affordable housing, which was looked at as increasing the density in a lot of neighborhoods. That obviously failed. I don't understand why she pushed it so hard, knowing she didn't have the support. But is there a path forward that could actually work to help increase the number of housing that is available on Long Island?
I think and hope there is. That proposal was twofold. There was the piece of it about meeting targets that would have been 3% down here, and then if a municipality, in this case, since we're talking about an unincorporated area, it would be the town of Hempstead, didn't increase housing stock by that level, there would essentially be an override at the state level, which I think was concerning for people. And then there was obviously when you get into the density, the transit-oriented piece, which would have required 50 unit per acre zoning around all of our train stations, which was very problematic for Nassau County in particular. But one of the proposals that was suggested through that process was taking that kind of target type number and doing some type of incentives for local municipalities. We have something, an aid program called AIM that has, none of the municipalities have gotten any increase in this state aid from this program for at least since Governor Cuomo first started, which was back in 2011. This would have had a program where by hitting certain targets, there would be some incentives for a municipality. And in particular, I think we need funding for infrastructure that goes along with this.
How big a program is it?
Well, it's only right now, what the governor had suggested in that piece for infrastructure, and that was part of the problem with her approach, was maybe a couple $100 million. When you think about statewide, that wasn't going to go very far. Right. So the needs for sewers, for even road upgrade, all of that is enormous if we want to really do some of these types of more affordable housing. And I would note, one of the things about the governor's proposal, it really didn't, you can meet the target, it didn't necessarily talk about affordable housing. We weren't necessarily going to have this panacea of a solution, because you could have met those targets without building any units that were actually affordable.
Yeah, but the end result is the more units you have available, the lower some of the prices can come. And that's just supply and demand. But obviously we didn't succeed on any level this year.
Yeah, and I think it has to be in terms of thinking about the diversity of options that we have in our housing market. We're such a single family home community, and I think one of the problems with the governor's kind of one size fits all plan was it didn't recognize the character of different communities. That there may be a downtown in a community that works for apartments above stores or something like that, and there may be other areas that really aren't gonna work with that.
Yeah, it has to be tailored for each neighborhood. Yep. So can we talk about bail reform? I mean, that's something that makes me crazy. I see people walking in this kind of turnstile justice system that's been going on, and I know they were supposed to be doing something about it in Albany. Have you heard anything in terms of bail reform?
Well, so the governor proposed something in the budget this year, and this was also one of the other main holdups with the budget, to change, there's language for least restrictive means. It basically directs the judge to, even if a crime is bail eligible, to set the least restrictive means on the individual. The ultimate language that made into the budget, in my opinion, isn't going to change anything. It really means the same thing, it's just different words. And again, it only applies when you have a crime that's bail eligible. So we've all heard about all these offenses that people commit that the judge has no discretion. That wouldn't have changed here. And I think, certainly on our side of the political aisle, what we've been talking about is actual discretion, letting the judge evaluate the defendant, their past, all of that, who's in front of them, and really what that boils down to is a dangerousness standard, where a judge can say this person poses a threat to public safety, and they can set bail on them, which is something every other state has, but New York.
Is that just a liberal issue that they just don't want it? I mean, it seems logical, makes sense to protect the communities.
As that was being talked about, even when bail reform first passed, I mean, the progressive side of the legislature all viewed it as, dangerousness being a racial thing and all that other type of stuff. Like New Jersey has some type of algorithm that they use, and that gives the judge some information so they can evaluate that. And they say, oh, it's biased. Well, then let's come up with one that
Right.
works. You know,
Right.
we're New York State. Let's come up with the best
that's-
metrics for it. But at the end of the day, you need real judicial discretion. You
Right.
don't need judges having their hands tied.
There are other programs that, like a New York incentive program for startups, and I think that's probably a great idea. Can you talk about those kind of programs?
Yeah, so, you know, we actually had a proposal that we came up with during COVID with regard to that, because the state has not done a good job, in my opinion, on economic development
Agreed.
programs. You know, we've had scandals, we've had, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars going out the door in all kinds of different ways, and not a lot to show for it.
Right.
And I think the better approach is taking funds that we're utilizing in that way and really giving them down to communities to work within you know, their local businesses and help promote their local businesses and help maybe provide some seed money for startups and things like that, rather than that like top-down approach from Albany on economic development.
Yeah, there are a lot of empty stores, obviously, in a lot of small towns, and I'm just wondering if those kind of startup programs and shop local kind of pushes could make a difference.
And I think a lot of, you know, talking to local chambers, you know, they really like the idea of us trying to take some of the idea I introduced this bill during COVID as we were coming out of it was, instead of the money we were spending, if you remember a few years ago, we used to see all these commercials for this Startup New York program.
Yep.
Right. Instead of having all those commercials for that,
Put the money into something real.
let's put it into something real. Let's let the local community utilize it to promote their local businesses.
Exactly. The news today is all about affirmative action program. That's been completely taken apart after decades of Supreme Court really support for it. Now it's been taken away. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I haven't. I will actually because I'm a lawyer by trade. At some point, I'm sure I will actually go and read the whole decision. Haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I think this has become, you know, a hot button issue over the last few years, because, you know, this has been taken to such an extreme in some ways. I mean, you know, in terms of putting forth programs, internships, just that are only eligible for, you know, for certain
Right.
races,
Right.
which I don't think is right. I think we want equality within our education system, certainly, and, you know, people shouldn't be disadvantaged in terms of getting into a school because
Right.
they don't check a box racially. I mean, you can have two individuals who both are, you know, from maybe a poor socioeconomic background, and one is at a disadvantage for admission.
I'm sure it's very frustrating for a lot of people that are trying to get into schools. We had asked you about the pool at Echo Park. We seem to find out that there's $1 million contract to refurbish the pool, the indoor pool, but we can't find out anything other than that they haven't started work.
Yeah, I just got some quick information earlier that they were, you know, they have done some of the internal work. They're waiting on some parts in terms of changing out all the filter systems. I guess the more modern system is a sand-based system for filtration. So that work is ongoing. He did say that the outdoor pool is slated to reopen some point in July.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's just the indoor. We haven't seen any kind of meaningful work happen. So we'll just have to keep our eye on that.
Absolutely.
So thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. This was great.
We want to thank Ed Ra for the time he's taken to talk to us about legislation in Albany.